Today, the Health Promotion Task Force are trying to take the ban one step further. They're calling on the government to ban smoking of cigarettes outside hospitality venues. They say the growth in indoor seating on pavements during the pandemic means people should be protected from smoke whilst in public spaces. The government has rejected the calls, with some aides saying it would create a nanny state. Well, let's just discuss this. I'm joined by the Director of Foresters Smokers' Rights Group, Simon Clark. Welcome, Simon. And also let's bring in my panel on the conversation as well, as Danny, Kelly and Lembit Opit. Simon, welcome. Firstly, I want to ask you, what do you make of the Health Task Force recommendations?
Well, there's no public health grounds to ban smoking outside. The original smoking ban, the ban on smoking in all enclosed public places, was introduced, we were told, to protect bar workers from the effects of secondhand smoke. But if you're smoking outside in the open air, there's absolutely no proven risk that you're putting anybody else's health at risk whatsoever. So there's no public health grounds. The other reason they're talking about it is because they say, well, it will help smokers quit. Well, it's not the government's job to help. I would actually use the word coerce or bully smokers to quit, because tobacco is a perfectly legal product. Smoking is a perfectly legitimate activity, and I'm sorry that some people seem to think it's so terrible that it should be driven out of society completely. But of course, the other thing is that when people go to a pub or a bar, they often like to have a smoke with their drink, and they can't smoke inside anymore. So the only place they can actually do that is outside. Now, ultimately, it has to be the choice of the proprietor, the landlord, whether or not he allows smoking on his premises. Now, at the moment, if any restaurateur or bar owner wants to ban smoking outside their pub or bar, they can do it. There's nothing to stop them. But of course, they know their business best. They know that there is still a substantial number of people who like to smoke, and it is not in their best business interests to actually ban smoking outside. So this has to be a matter for the individual businessman, not government.
Interesting you say that it's a legitimate thing, whilst it is, but I reckon if it was introduced in this sort of time, it would never, ever be legalised at all. And you talk about this is not a good idea in terms of the business aspect of it, but surely there are way more people who don't smoke than do. So for me, I don't want to sit around people outside, in the pleasant outside, having to take on all the smoke just because they're allowed to do it out there. I mean, there'll be a lot of people who think that.
Well, I'm sure there are. The majority of people these days don't smoke, but we can't have tyranny by the majority. I mean, the reality is, if you don't want to be exposed to even a whiff of tobacco smoke, you have the whole of the inside of the bar or pub or restaurant. You don't have to be outside with the smokers. And I'm actually a non-smoker, and I think I'm of a generation that grew up with people smoking around me, and frankly, it didn't bother me. Look, I do accept that there are circumstances where it can be inconsiderate to light up when you're next to a smoker. But the reality is that most smokers these days don't do that. But what they do is they ask the people next door to them, do you mind if I smoke? And if somebody says, yes, I do, then they probably won't do it. But people have to be allowed to smoke if they choose to do so, without this constant harassment with the rules, regulation, legislation banning them from actually smoking. It has to be the choice of the businessman whether or not he allows smoking on his premises. And we are talking about smoking in the open air, not indoors.